today I'd like to talk to you about keys and scales. So you've probably heard these terms before, but you may not know exactly what they mean. So let's start with the key of a song. In the simplest terms, a key is a collection, a group, a pool of notes that work well together and form the basis of the song. All of the notes of the song, whether it's from a guitar or a bass or the singer or a piano or whatever instrument might be playing, all those notes are taken from the group of notes in the key. Okay, so a key is just a group of notes that work very well together, that fit together, they match. Now, if you were to take those group of notes and arrange them from the lowest pitch to the highest pitch, you would get a scale. Now, typically, when you think of a scale, you would think of do, re, mi, a sound like this. That is called a major scale. And for right now, that's the scale we're going to be working on, a major scale. Now, major scales, if you haven't gone through the lesson on the musical alphabet and sharps and flats, I highly, highly recommend you go back and do that now, because all this stuff will relate to that. So a scale, a major scale, no matter what scale you're playing, it will always start on a specific letter. We'll use the letter A as our example, and it'll go through the entire alphabet until you hit the note A again. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. That is your scale. Now, certain scales have notes that are sharp, notes that are flat, and there are 12 scales in total. So we're not going to run over all those scales. What we're going to deal with is the construction of a scale. Why do some scales have sharps and flats? Why do some not? And we're going to focus on the G major scale. So there's a simple formula. Now, I don't want you guys to memorize this formula, but as long as you understand how it's constructed, it will help you understand it. So there's a simple formula that uses tones and semitones. So let me explain for a second what that is before I show you what the formula is. A semitone on a bass or on a guitar or a fretted instrument, a semitone is the distance of one fret. So here's fret 2. If I was to play a semitone higher, I would play fret 3. If I was to play a semitone lower than fret 2, I would play fret number 1. Okay, now a tone is just 2 semitones or 2 frets in the case of our instrument. So again, let's use fret 2 as our example. So fret 2, a tone higher than fret 2 is fret 4, 2 frets higher. A tone lower than fret 2 is fret 0, or the open string. All right, so tones and semitones. Now let's get to how these scales are constructed. How are they made? Why is it just some arbitrary choice of frets and letters and sharps and flats? It is not. So now we know tones and semitones. We can apply the formula to get a major scale. And this will explain sharps and flats. So whatever note we start on, again, we're going to start on the note G. Whatever note we start on, it's going to be the same formula, the same tones and semitones as we go through. But as I said, we're going to start on G because that is the most common key that you'll probably encounter. I'm assuming most people will be playing with guitars. Even pianos tend to play that key a lot. So we're going to start with G. Okay, so here's the formula. So we start with G, and we move a tone higher. So that means 2 frets. Difficult math question. 0, right? We're on fret 0, plus 2 equals 2. Okay? The next note is another tone. You can already start to hear that very, very common major scale sound. Then a semitone, and then a tone, another tone, another tone, and finally, to finish, a semitone. So we have our starting note. We go tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 and semitone. Now, I don't want you guys to memorize that. What I do want you to do, though, is understand why certain keys have sharps and flats. I'm showing you why things are made. I'm not expecting you to memorize all this stuff. Because if I explain what it is, then all of a sudden, it's not quite so obscure. It's easier to relate to what I'm talking about. So again, if we go back to the letter names, and that musical alphabet, go back to that lesson, we're going to be able to find out what the names of the notes in the G major scale are. So let's go through those same frets, but this time I'm going to say the letter names as we go. So we have G, A, B, C, D, E. Okay, here's the one wrinkle, and this is another good reason to do the key of G, because it gives you just a little bit extra to think about. Normally, when we were figuring out our notes, the note F would only be one fret away. But our next note in the scale, because we've been doing our tone, tone, semitone, is on fret 11. So it's not an F, it's an F sharp. Okay, very important to call it an F sharp. If you're communicating with someone, make sure you say F sharp. If you say F, they're gonna play an F. So you have to specify F sharp. Okay, F sharp, and then we get back to G. So let's do that one more time. I won't talk in between. I'll just go between all the notes. So we have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. Awesome. Now it's important, once you get used to that, to go backwards, because as we talked about in the other lesson, saying the alphabet backwards is much, much more difficult. It's not at all as natural, just because you have not done it as much. So let's go backwards. We have G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, and finally G. Awesome. So again, I'm sure you know the sound of that. You've heard it before. Just trying to put explanations to things you already know by ear. So you can also play scales going across the strings this way, going up and like there's all kinds of different ways to do it. You can play the same thing we just did on a different string. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. But I find to illustrate how the scale is constructed, and later on when we look at how to alter this scale a little bit and get different scales, it's very important to play it on one string because it's all laid out very, very nicely for you. You can see how many frets there are between all the different notes. Really, really important. Okay, so you might have to go back through this lesson a few times and just kind of reinforce what we've talked about. And again, there's nothing really here that you should memorize and practice. I mean, by all means, please practice the G major scale going up and down one string. But this is more to prepare you for the next set of lessons where we're going to be looking at the G major scale more in depth. So take your time on this stuff, have fun, and I'll see you soon.